Hi, Dr. Corey here, the OHIO podcast, right here on YouTube. Subscribe, like, and share. What are you doing already? Do that. Come on. Smash that like button, as Eric would say. We're going to talk about a couple topics, or just one topic, really. Um, it's a heated topic within Buckeye Nation, but I have gone for a long time of kind of walking on eggshells with this topic. I really want to get it off my chest now because it's become relevant again. Uh, Kyle McCord was on John Gruden and the Gruden show, whatever that show is, and he discussed a lot of different things. And of course, now he's a hot button topic with Ohio State once again. Eric just did a video about it. I haven't seen it yet. I didn't even know he was doing a video. This is not a response to Eric. This is not a comeback at Eric or anything like that. Eric and Chris kind of are similar on Kyle McCord. I feel differently, but I'm going to discuss that and get it all off my chest right now. And but this is not, like I said, an attack or a response or anything like that on Eric. I have a lot of love and respect for both Eric and Chris, and I respect their opinions on things. And that's why I enjoy the Sunday roundtable so much, is because we all get to talk and we all get to talk to each other about different topics and see where each other fall. Um, but I've definitely never agreed on Kyle McCord, but I don't agree with most of Buckeye Nation. I'm in the minority on this, and I totally understand that, and I totally respect and get that. But I got to be honest, guys. I think the Buckeye Nation's like hatred of Kyle McCord, some of it I can understand, some of it is just based on emotional bias. Um, because that guy's been hated for a long time in Buckeye Nation. Now, granted, it's steadily grew over time. It wasn't initially, but there was always like a contingent of fans that I think started to dislike him. And I think it was put out because of Menace more than anything. That the idea that it started with him in the quarterback battle with Devin Brown. But I've always wanted to kind of get this all off my chest because I think that there's I'm not this is not a compare Will and Kyle in the sense of who's the better quarterback. I don't I think Will was better for Ohio State. I should get my stance clear up front, and because there are nuances to this and there's layers of this and there's levels to this. And I think a lot of people, when they argue these things, they don't really talk about the layers and nuance. It's always got to be like either you think he's the greatest or you think he's the worst, and I just think it's just like not fun to discuss things like that. It's fun to get into the nitty gritty and deep dive into these things and try to discuss why, what, where, when, And I will say this: I think Will Howard walked into a much better situation at Ohio State than Kyle did, and I actually got in an argument. Argument's way too strong. Small debate with a good friend of mine about the two situations between Kyle and Will. And I stand very strongly, very firmly on the idea that Kyle really got the raw end of the deal at Ohio State in a lot of ways. It's not excuse some things. I mean, he's I'm not saying he was a great leader. He wasn't. Uh, I Will was definitely a better leader, better fit for the team without question. His personality is definitely more likable out in the public. Kyle was never that charming guy in front of the microphone. So I get a lot of people. I felt like a lot of people just didn't like him because they just didn't like his personality, which is fine. I mean, that's your right, but I just don't think it's a way to judge a quarterback as much. So I want to go through several things based on what Kyle McCord went through at Ohio State that I think way too many people in Buckeye Nation will overlook. And I'm not sitting there suggesting that I'm going to convince you. I just need to get it off my chest. This is therapy for me, if you will. And again, this is not a comeback at Eric for his video. I haven't watched it yet. If there's some overlap, that's total accident. I'll watch it after this. I made that intentional when I saw him post it. I said I will watch it, but I will watch it after I'm done recording because I came to him like 2 days ago, I think, and said I'm going to make a Kyle McCord video because I just got some stuff on my chest, and then he made his, and because he was upset about some of the things I think that he said on John Gruden, and I respect that. I So again, there might be some overlap, but it's totally not intentional, and I have nothing, like I said, love and respect for Eric and Chris. Um, in fact, the funny part is when I joined the roundtable initially, I thought Chris and I were going to butt heads a lot. It turns out I actually mostly agree with Chris most of the time, like 90% of the time. And I think Chris, to his credit, for people who just say that he's a hothead or he's just negative or whatever. No, he's very nuanced in how he feels, and I appreciate that about him. He actually has reasons, and he can admit if he's wrong about something, or he can So he's totally different than the persona I think that even I had of him when before I joined the roundtable. Not that I disliked him. I just thought, well, he's just he's a very upset fan, but he's really not. He's really not. He's actually very nuanced in how he feels. Um, anyways, to get into this Kyle McCord versus Will Howard debate, this is not a discussion on who's the better quarterback. Many people have their minds made up because Will Howard won the national championship. He's the better quarterback. He might be the better college quarterback. I'm not saying he's not. I say that the circumstances are extraordinarily different. It is so hard to compare those two, in my opinion. The only way that I can really compare them again is vocal leadership. I'd say Will has the edge, but there's also possibly a reason for that that I'll get into. There's several things that we need to get into about Kyle's tenure here at Ohio State that I think way too many people overlook, and maybe even not even think about, to be honest. So let's be real. Let's go to day one. When CJ Stroud went to the NFL, it was who's the next guy. Most people felt it was Kyle McCord. And Devin Brown was a highly touted quarterback out of high school as well. And I think, nobody, it started off small, but I think there was a small contingent of people who wanted Devin Brown over Kyle. And we always do this, right? Every year, we if there's a quarterback battle, we kind of pick sides. And even quietly, even if we're only like 51-49, another guy. I was very much of the mindset I wanted Kyle to be the guy, and because I felt he had a lot of talent. I watched him in high school. I felt this guy had a lot of talent, but of course, the narratives come about now in hindsight, and I think it's a little ridiculous. But I mean, I've even seen people say we only took Kyle because we were trying to get Marvin. Yeah, that makes sense. Brian Hartline really struggles with recruiting receivers. We couldn't have possibly got him. Couldn't possibly have gotten Marvin without Kyle. I mean, come on, guys. It's like we're just outright making things up now at this point. If Brian Hartline had a history of struggling to recruit, I'd be like, well, maybe there's something to that. But my goodness, he just hands picks anybody he wants. So, anyways, it was definitely not a get Kyle so we can get Marvin. I don't think we'd even do that for a wide receiver. We're gonna get a future quarterback based on a wide receiver. Come on. Um, that's just silly on so many levels. But I mean, I'm talking about common sense and logic on some of these things. But it started out in the spring where it looked like Kyle was way ahead of Devin because Devin had an injury, and then from reading between the lines, it sounded like Kyle through the summer and into the fall kind of felt the job was his, kind of got complacent, and Devin made some major moves, making plays and pushing hard, and good for Devin for that, by the way. And because I agree, I mean this is something that was a problem with even Dwayne Haskins back in the day. Even Urban commented on the fact that Dwayne Haskins was, um, you know, sometimes too complacent in his place. He didn't really try to push, and uh, like in the first year as the third stringer to JT, and I cannot remember the backup. I think it was Cardell. Yeah, yeah. No, that was 16. Okay, so I think it might have been Joe Burrow. He was kind of, but he was too complacent, right? Um, that he just kind of like, okay, this is who I am. I'm third stringer. I'm going to stay third stringer. And Urban didn't like the fact that he didn't keep pushing. And it sounded like Kyle kind of just didn't keep pushing, but Devin did. So kudos to Devin for that. Um, and I guess at some point, Ryan Daven confirmed that Devin started to kind of move ahead of Kyle. Probably they're tired of Mr. Check down at one point. So, hey, dude, you got to start making plays. Quarterback's got to make plays. And Kyle had a couple bad practices. So what happened was from what it sounds is like Devin had a couple of bad practices or he threw a bunch of picks and Ryan Day just said let's go with Kyle because he's a little bit safer pick and he's a little bit ahead with the playbook and things like that. So yeah, I think it was actually kind of close in fall, but Kyle kind of got the edge. Um, Now, I mean, he didn't even totally name his starters like what, like week 3. But I mean, let's be real. Kyle was the guy. Week 1, I think they played Devin Brown like 1 or 2 series, and he was running the ball essentially. But that being said, I think the story came out from Menace, and I'm not saying there's not elements of truth to this story. I just think it got so overblown that I kind of got angry about the story because I remember with my friends, I was like, this story is such BS. The idea that Derek McCord just like launched into. I'm not saying Derek wasn't ever a problem. I don't know the whole story behind that because you never can know unless you're in the room because things get blown out of proportion all the time. But this idea that Derek just marched into the room and he just was like, "Hey, if my kid doesn't start, he were transferring." Now I have no doubt No doubt, because Joe Burrow did the exact same freaking thing. That if he found out he wasn't going to be the starter after sitting for a couple of years, then what's the point? It's not going to happen for you here. You got to move on and you got to play somewhere. Um, the thing with Joe Burrow and Dwayne Haskins is Joe really challenged Dwayne in the spring to the point where they thought it was going to be Dwayne for sure, but Joe made such an impression that they said, okay, well, I don't know. Let's go into the fall and keep the competition rolling. But if Joe couldn't be like, I need to be the named starter. I got to move on. I can't go into fall and risk it, and then I'm the backup again. I can't do that because he was older than Dwayne, and Kyle's older than Devin. So if Devin becomes a starter, Devin's not going to go. He's not a one and done guy. Kyle's going to sit another couple of years, and he didn't have his red shirt. I wouldn't blame Kyle at all for suggesting I might just have to transfer. It wasn't an ultimatum. It's just like, well, I got to weigh my options if I'm losing the job. If I'm losing the job after 2 years in the program, it's probably just not going to happen for me. I mean, that's a reasonable take, especially in today's world. I never understood the outcry of this. I don't understand why Kyle gets the vitriol for stuff like that. It's like, well, yeah, that's perfectly normal. But we blew it up into Derek strong arming Ryan Day into making him a starter. And I just think to myself, yeah, this makes total sense. Ryan Day said, well, Kyle is the lesser quarterback. So out of fear of having the lesser quarterback transfer, I'm going to start him over the better quarterback. That just say that out loud to yourself. How ridiculous that sounds. Um, it's like, well, Corey, what about depth? What about depth? He's not starting a lesser quarterback because he's worried about depth. That makes no sense. Stop it right now. Kyle won the job. Okay, you may not like it, but Kyle won the job. And there was like, and then there was a story with Dave Biddle. Well, half the coaches wanted Devin. I'm sure some of the coaches did. I don't know if it was half, but I'm sure some of the coaches. I know Corey Dennis did. And well, Corey Dennis is gone for a reason. I'm just saying. And then I will get into that later, but I'm sure Corey Dennis did. I'm sure because I think he was feeding Zach the information and Menace. That's just speculation. And I'm sure there's a couple others that did. Half the coaches, I don't know. I mean, that's true or not, but ultimately it's the head coach's call. So I don't understand why anybody would get upset about the idea that well, half the coach. That means the other half didn't. So Ryan Day is the That means Ryan Day is the deal breaker, the tiebreaker on that, and he's the head coach and he's the QB guru on the staff, so he picked Kyle McCord. Again, none of the blow up actually made sense to me when I heard it the first time. So I thought immediately out of the gate, Kyle McCord is just hated by a lot of Buckeye Nation because of these stories. Um, and I just think to myself, yeah, he's really going to have to be amazing to blow these stories up, and he just wasn't. He wasn't amazing. He was mid to pretty good at times. It got to a point really with Marvin Harrison that Kyle could make a great throw. Really wasn't that hard of a catch for Marvin, but they would marvel at Marvin for the catch instead of like, wow, what a great throw. And I'm not saying that he always made great throws. He didn't. There's some throws that are pretty bad. Um, but you know that right out the gate, it's not a good start. It's not a match made in heaven. It's not a marriage made in heaven. But there was still a good number of us who still wanted to believe and think he could get better. Um, but there's if you look at the season, he kind of remained the same. He didn't really play exceptionally well. I mean, there's a couple of times he played pretty well. Um, and it leads up into the Michigan game. I mean, he was 11. They were 11-0 going into that game. It wasn't like he was so bad they were losing. They were 11-0 going into that game, and he got scapegoated because of two interceptions. One that even John Gruden says is on Marvin Harrison. And at the time, I was trying to be diplomatic and with my group chat and say, yeah, sure, he shouldn't have thrown it. But I mean, you look at a quarterback, he has a split second to make a decision, and he has to trust that his guy is going to be there. And Marvin just stopped and didn't even cross the face of the, as they said in the video, of Will Johnson. He just kind of let Will Johnson have it. I thought Marvin, this is going to get heat on me, but that's fine. I thought Marvin made a lot of mistakes that year. A lot. He dropped a lot of passes. That Purdue game was bonkers. Yeah, he made a great catch in the beginning where it was underthrown. Yeah, I'll even admit if Kyle underthrows or makes a bad throw. And he had to reach over the corner and grab it, and it was a great catch. But in the rest of the game, he just basic things he just couldn't catch. And I thought all year he kind of sometimes would give up on routes, got a little pouty at times. He dropped the passes, and people just kept blowing up the hype train on him. And I'm like, okay, honestly, I remember I was on Jay Stevens talking Buckeyes pack locked on Buckeyes podcast proclaiming that Marvin Harrison would be the greatest receiver to ever play at Ohio State. This is before Jeremiah Smith. Um, this is 2 years before Jeremiah Smith, and I was such a huge fan. And I got to be honest, I was slightly disappointed his junior season. I'm still rooting for him. He's a Buckeye. I want him to do well in the NFL. I feel bad he's with Kyle Murray, but it is what it is. But again, he wasn't perfect, and people just kept blaming Kyle to the point where people were even saying, "Well, it's because he's off on the throw." It's right in his hands, guys. I mean, what do you want Kyle to do? In fact, nobody can even give Kyle credit for like a good throw. I remember the Michigan game when he stepped up in the pocket. He was running up in the pocket and he launched one down the field. Marvin was getting clearly interfered with. He made a fantastic catch. I'm not taking anything away from it. It was a one-handed catch, but Kyle put it right in the breadbasket, and nobody could say, "Yeah, Kyle, dang, good throw." Just wow, what a catch! That became habit with the fan base. It just is a bad taste in their mouths with Kyle from the beginning, and it just didn't get better. It got worse. So let's go over several things that I think that if you compare Kyle McCord and Will Howard's situations at Ohio State, you really can't compare them. First of all, other than the Michigan game, Will Howard was relatively healthy all year. I mean, I'm sure there was nicks and bangs and dings and things like that I don't know about, but he was relatively healthy. Allegedly, he had a concussion against Michigan. It was never confirmed, but the way he played, you can kind of say it's probably true. Um, so whatever. But McCord, he was playing hurt a lot on his ankles were just mangled. This is what gets me the most with people is like they want to say things along the lines of, "Well, he's not a scrambler. What does he need his ankles for?" If you don't think a quarterback, even a pocket passer, needs their ankles, I don't know what to tell you at that point. I just wonder, like, have you ever watched football? I mean, there's several things about having good ankles. Bad ankles. It prevents proper weight transfer. That you can't plant the foot. There's no back leg push. I mean, it's all gone. It kills your base. Just with no base, there's no power. Throws were going to sail on you. They're going to wobble. They're going to come out late. And the thing is, it's like people like to criticize them because it's errant throws. I'm like, well, when you have terrible ankles, yeah, you're going to have some errant throws. Um, it forces rushed reads. If you know you can't escape pressure, it changes how you read the pocket, how you read the receiver, how you read the coverage. You're limited in what you could do if you can't escape the pocket. Sometimes you panic a little earlier. It changes your internal clock. It leads to quicker, sometimes bad decisions. It ruins your consistency. One throw would look great, the next throw looks like you're shot putting it. And he did have times like that where he throw it deep, and it's like, what was that? That wasn't even close. And I know he has the arm, so what was the problem? And excuse me, if you look at how important footwork is to Ryan Day, um, Ryan Day is like a savant with creating good footwork with quarterbacks. It's hard to do that when your ankles are mangled. I mean, look, I remember J Book on Twitter commenting on it when he got out of the bus to go play Michigan, and he was just hobbling. He couldn't even walk. And even J Book was like, "Oh, geez, our starting quarterback can barely walk." And it would explain why he's a bit of a statue at times. I'm not saying he's Michael Vick, obviously, but I'll be honest with you, when he had healthy ankles, I didn't think he ran much worse than Devin Brown. I didn't think Devin Brown was that much exceptionally more athletic than he was. Devin Brown was definitely the better athlete, but I didn't see it like light leaps and bounds better than Kyle. Um, so the injury to his ankles, if you think that didn't play a factor in his ability to play quarterback, then I would say you're just wrong. I don't know what else to tell you. I mean, his ankles are really bad all year, but or most of the year. And I know people want to say, "Well, there's no excuses." I really can't stand a no excuse crowd. I can't. I can't. I remember when I was playing high school basketball, and again, this is not an Al Bundy story, but I was playing high school basketball, and I was a pretty decent player. I had a small Christian school. It wasn't like I was like going to college play basketball or something, but I was pretty decent. I started, and I remember I rolled my ankle really badly, and I just, every time I took a step, it would feel a sharp pain up my leg. I just couldn't move. It was terrible. So, anyways, I tried to play, and I was in practice, and I was couldn't play defense. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't pivot. I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything. I was trying to power through it. I was trying, even though it was so painful. And my coach screamed at me, "Get you, I get you off the court if you're gonna play like that." And he knew I had an injury. I hate the no excuses crowd. Sometimes it's not an excuse, it's just reality. It's just flat out reality. There's nothing you can do about it. And it's like taking a guy with no arms and say, "Hey, do 10 push-ups," and then there's no excuses, just do it. No, there's reality that he doesn't have any arms. The reality is that he was extremely injured with his ankles, and he played all year. You say, "Well, there's no excuses." Well, okay, then there's no excuse for Will Howard in the Michigan game for people who like to bring up a possible concussion. You can't have it both ways. You just can't. Either the injuries matter or they don't matter. They don't matter for one person, and they don't matter for another person. So I don't want to hear it. Um, that's that actually to me is the funniest part about all that is it means like Ryan Day trusted Devin Brown less than any backup quarterback I've ever seen because he wouldn't put him in over Kyle, even though Kyle had mangled ankles, and he wouldn't put in him over Will with a concussion. And we all seen that he will sit people with concussions. Go back to Georgia with Marvin Harrison. So uh, I mean, it's just like how little did he trust Devin Brown, even though everybody there was not everybody, but there was a large contingent of the fan base who thought Devin Brown should be starting over Kyle McCord. Um, and of course, people go back to the idea that Ryan Day's a coward. He's too cowardly to. It's like stop it. Ryan Day has overhauled his whole defensive staff twice. Can we stop with this? Um, anyways, let's go back now. Let's go to number two here, the offensive line comparison. Now, I do know that Will Howard lost two All Americans and Jonathan Simmons and Seth McLaughlin, obviously, and those hurt for sure. But and don't get me wrong, that offensive line was terrible against Michigan, and they were pretty good against Penn State. But Donnie Jackson allowed a couple sacks to Shaq Carter, who's really really good. Um, but in that playoff sequence, that offensive line was flat out dominant. Our run game was good, the pass protection was good, and we won all four games pretty handily. So there was never one point where Kyle McCord's offensive line was flat out just dominant. And in fact, it was a mixed bag of point to the point where Jonathan Simmons was terrible in the first part of the year. He got better. Hinsman was pretty solid, but he was still learning on the fly. It's probably a year or two early for him. Donnie Jackson was an okay guard. I'd argue he's a better left tackle than he was a guard. In fact, the second interception against Michigan, he got dog walked by Mason Graham and right into pressuring Kyle McCord. So, and I'm not knocking Donnie. He was an MVP this past year for sure, and he improved dramatically. But he was an average at best guard most of the time. The offensive line was never dominant for Kyle McCord, but it became dominant easily for Will Howard during the playoff run. Those are just facts, you know. And everybody was amazed, and we were actually sad to lose Justin Fry, which was amazing to me since this fan base, including myself, just didn't care for him prior to that. So that's something to keep an eye on is like the offensive line with you combine that with the fact that Kyle McCord had bad ankles and you just sit there and you can start putting pieces of the puzzle together. Here's the one that's going to be controversial to you guys. The receiver room was better for Will Howard. You can get mad at me. You could say I'm wrong. I don't care. I will challenge you and say you're wrong. Freshman Carnell Tate, often injured Emeka Egbuka. Marvin Harrison was great, but not perfect. For Will Howard, that was for Kyle McCord. I will give Kyle McCord this. Kate Stover was better than any tight end that Will Howard had. I will absolutely agree to that. But Will Howard, the freakazoid Jeremiah Smith, who right now is as good as Marvin Harrison ever was at Ohio State, or maybe even better, a healthy Emeka Egbuka and a sophomore Carnell Tate. I would take that second room any day of the week over what Kyle McCord had to play with. In fact, there was oftentimes I thought Kyle McCord had one option, and it was Marvin Harrison. Um, it's frustrating to me because it's like people like see a star next to your name and just think you're automatically good, as if you don't have to get to college to improve. Carnell Tate definitely improved his sophomore year dramatically, I would argue. Um, so Will Howard got the benefit of that, and Kyle McCord did not. Kyle McCord did not get the benefit to grow with his receiver room in live game action, and he didn't get the benefit to play with the freakazoid Jeremiah Smith. Yeah, Smith is unfair. It's just unfair. And there was many times Will Howard would just he was the meme. He would close his eyes, screw it. Jeremiah's down there somewhere. He did that against Oregon a few times in the playoffs, and it was just like hilarious. It felt like a bunch of peewee corners trying to stop their dad from catching the ball, and it just never worked, obviously. I would definitely say that Will Howard had the better receiver room, except for tight end. Kyle definitely had the better tight end. There's no dispute that. Running backs. Are you actually going to tell me that Trey Henderson, who played 10 out of 13 games and played well, he did. He averaged like 5.9 yards per carry. In the second half of the season, he was tearing it up. And Chip Trayanum is a better combination than senior Travian Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. Are we even going to argue this? Because I had one person try to argue with me. I had one person try to argue with me about that. It was only slightly better. Boy, I will vehemently disagree with that all day, every day. All day, every day. Nope. Will Howard had the much better running back situation, unquestionably. Sorry, it's just true. I don't even have to go into that one. Here's something nobody talks about: QB experience. Kyle McCord had one start, I think, previous to against Akron in his freshman year, previous to his becoming the guy in 2023. So he had 1 year as a starter. It was a new experience, new pressures, new game speed, new decisions. Will Howard had 28 starts before he came to Ohio State. He had 34 total games with Kansas State and 28 starts total. I don't know. That's a big deal to me that he had that much exposure and experience before he got to Ohio State. I mean, that I've that to me blew me away. I knew he played a lot of games. I didn't know he started that many. I knew he started one full year. He didn't start a full year over that, but 28 games and playing in 34 over 4 seasons. Yikes, that's a lot. And people don't really want to consider the fact that he was way more experienced than McCord ever got a chance to be at Ohio State. So there's also that. And also, I will go to this coaching and scheme, the Chip Kelly effect. Now, people want to immediately argue to me that Kyle McCord didn't fit Chip Kelly's system. I agree with you. He did not. It doesn't matter because the coaching situation for Will Howard was far better than it was for Kyle McCord. You're talking about Ryan Day not calling plays, being the head coach, but he's also an offensive genius. He's in the offensive game planning room. Then you were talking about Brian Hartline not calling plays, but being an assistant to Chip Kelly and learning how to play call under one of the best. Chip Kelly being the QB coach, but really Bill Fessler kind of was. He was the GA, I believe, and now he's a QB coach. Fessler's got already a solid pedigree at 30 years old. And Chip Kelly really likes him. And Chip Kelly's one of the greatest play callers of all time in college football. He's originally the OG of having, at least in recent memory, of having Oregon on the national championship map. It's just, and then plus he's working with his mentee Ryan Day. So it's just like to talk about a situation being so much better. Also, Will Howard had Carlos Loughlin over Tony Alford. Um, I just don't even know what to say at this point. I'd argue, even though losing Kevin Wilson the year prior was tough, Keenan Bailey's a better actual tight end coach than Kevin Wilson, at least better recruiter. That's for darn sure. 2023, we lose Kevin Wilson. Wilson was Ryan Day's right hand man. They like working together. He could trust Kevin Wilson to be in the booth, tell him what was going on, even though Ryan Day was a play caller. Now, in 2023, I firmly believed Ryan Day was ready to give up play calling a year earlier. And in fact, the evidence is there. I think the obvious choice would have been Kevin Wilson. And for the fact is that so many Buckeye fans actually like downplay losing him like it's not a big deal. It to me is absolutely insane and ridiculous because he's one of the greatest play callers and offensive minds of the last 25 years in college football. And he was fantastic for Oregon. He was fantastic for Ohio State. I mean, I'm not Oregon, but Oklahoma, and fantastic for Ohio State. And he was a great replacement for Ed Warner. Are you kidding me? But um, I have every belief that he would have given the play calling duties to Kevin Wilson if he had not left for Tulsa. So then he tried with Brian Hartline in the summer. It didn't work out. Ryan Day had to continue to play call plays with Corey Dennis as QB coach. Brian Hartline, who's unsuccessful play caller and wide receiver coach, kind of offensive coordinator. Not even sure what the dynamic there really is. So at least we had an idea as to what it was with Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly was the coach of the offense. We had a leader, and not too many chefs in the kitchen. So situation going on there. So Kyle McCord was dealt. He had bad injuries, a worse offensive line. Even with losing two All American type players, the offensive line was still better in 24 than it was in 23. He had the better tight end, but he did not. He had the worst wide receivers. Um, worst wide receiver room. Even though they weren't bad, they were still not as good as what Will Howard had. The worst running back room. He had the worst coaching situation. And we're sitting here trying to say, and he's already got the media out against him in the beginning, blowing up stories that don't even make logical sense. So you're telling me, like, what is the? I don't understand. Like, I don't understand how you can look at these two situations. I'm trying to think and get my notes in order here. How you can get how you can get these two situations even compare the two and trying to say, well, this guy's a better player, better quarterback, yada yada yada. Well, one played, you know, in a program at its peak and still went 10-2. And I'm not saying that's all Will's fault. Will played phenomenally against Oregon, did not play well against Michigan for whatever reason. Could be concussion, could be he just didn't play well. I don't know. He had mistakes and he almost didn't totally play well against Penn State either. So I don't know. And then up until that point, I saw him in one big game play really well, which was Oregon. And Kyle McCord was 11-1. So here's another thing we want to talk about here is, let's say this is all hypothetical, but let's say we don't have the 12-team playoff. Ohio State 10-2 is not going to the playoff. They don't go to the Big Ten title game. They're not going to the playoff. So Oregon would have been representing the Big Ten in the playoff, undoubtedly, and they would have earned it. If it weren't for the 12-team playoff, Will Howard gets a chance to redeem himself. He does redeem himself, and he deserves a ton of credit for that. He's a Buckeye legend, and I love him. I'm not knocking him, but he got a chance to redeem himself in that 14 playoff. An 11-1 Buckeye team in 2023, losing by 6 points on the road to the number one team in the country, definitely makes the playoffs one way or another. If it was expanded to 12. And then the answer to that usually is people saying to me, well, there's no way that Kyle McCord would have won the playoff. I'm sorry. Don't even try to lie to me and tell me you thought Will Howard was going to lead us to the Natty after November 30th and that lost to Michigan. Don't even try to tell me you were like, oh yeah, but we're still going to make a huge run. I mean, there were people like Vengeance Rising, who frequents this channel, saying that we were going to blow out Tennessee, and more credit to him. He called it, but there was nobody on this channel that, me, Chris, Eric, nobody felt we were prepared to make a run for the Natty. In fact, the blowout against Tennessee threw us for a loop, and then the blowout against Oregon threw us for a loop. None of it made sense. I think it was after the Oregon game we felt like we can go make a run here, but you can't, if you weren't sure, you can't tell me for sure that you were sure that Ryan or that Will Howard was going to make a run and we were going to win the national championship after that loss to Michigan. So my point with that is, even though if you don't feel Kyle McCord would have taken us to a natty, and maybe he wouldn't have, the chances are the field is always going to win in this situation, but you don't know because you didn't know Will Howard. You don't know about Kyle McCord. Just saying. If he got a chance to get into a 12-team playoff, maybe he redeems himself, goes out on top. I don't know. I'm not saying it definitely would have happened. I'm just saying I don't know, and you don't either. You can say, no, it wouldn't have happened. Well, you don't know because you didn't know again November 30th. And I'm going to go ahead and just piss off the crowd with one more thing about Kyle McCord. That boy was taken. Excuse me. Wow. That came out of nowhere. That guy was taken way out of context with his "it's just another game" comment about Michigan. He did not take the rivalry lightly. I know this firsthand, by the way, firsthand from an extremely good source. He prepared like crazy for that game. He tried really hard and played very, very hard. And he practiced and worked very hard for that game. I'm sorry. I understand what people want to take the comment and like say that he's just saying that the rivalry means nothing. They were taken way out of context. It was a pregame interview. McCord says, well, at the end of the day, it's just another game, and we have to go out there and execute regardless of emotions. And people automatically said, oh, he's just saying the Michigan game, just another game. And yeah, I understand why if you read the headline, that's the conclusion you come to. But if you see the whole thing, it was a response to a question about managing emotions during high stakes games. And his intent was to emphasize the importance of maintaining composure and focusing on execution rather than he wasn't downplaying the significance of the rivalry. He's just saying you got to keep your head about you. And by the way, multiple players have said that about the game. I think Jonathan Wells came on there and said, no, you want to keep he actually came on and said, you want to, even when it comes to the game, you want to keep your composure as best as humanly possible. He came on this podcast and said that. So this is not new, but then again, you say, well, Kyle's got to have more sense than say it like that. Well, I agree, but the fans have to have more sense to actually watch the interview and come to a realistic conclusion, and not just automatically assume he doesn't care about the Michigan game or he doesn't get it. Um, People have been saying that about Ryan Day, and I just don't buy that at all. I mean, yeah, if you lose the game, doesn't mean you don't get it. I mean, Urban Meyer was within inches of losing that game a few times. So does that mean he didn't get it? Come on now, Jim Tressel was in inches of losing that game a few times. Does that mean he didn't get it? It's like sometimes fortune, just falls your way, or you cheat like Michigan. I don't know, but anyway, um, so my whole point with this, I had to get that off my chest, is that I think Kyle McCord got a bad rap on a lot of things. I don't think he was great. I don't think he was necessarily better than anybody from since 2012. I mean, I would take Miller over him. I'd take JT over him. But although there's times JT made me want a guy like Kyle McCord, but overall, I'd take JT over him. I'd take Dwayne Haskins over him. I take Justin Fields. I take CJ Stroud, and I take Will Howard over him. This is not to say that I'm not saying he was some elite player and nobody appreciated him. I'm saying he was, not maybe up to the standards we've been used to as of late. And I think it's funny that people want to proclaim that he was so bad that you think that Ryan Day suddenly can't coach quarterbacks. It's like, come on now. I mean, it's like, first of all, he wasn't that bad. And second of all, we didn't get a chance to, I mean, he talked about with Gruden, we didn't get a chance to see him try to grow into the next season. And most people didn't want to see it. I get it. But I mean, people can grow and get better. I mean, Joe Burrow, his first year with starting with LSU was, good. He wasn't great. And his next year, he was obscenely great. Um, I mean, honestly, what he did with Syracuse, Kyle McCord, that is, with kind of average supporting cast, was pretty darn good. And not, he wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but he had a really horrible game against Pittsburgh. But at the same time, overall, he had a really good season and played himself probably into a higher draft pick. He's probably going to be a third or fourth round guy, and he's got talent. He really does. So I don't know how good he'll be in the NFL. I kind of see a guy who's a career backup with him, same as I do with Will Howard. But I think they're both guys that can come in and win a couple games for you. Um, I would take Will Howard in my locker room in the NFL any day of the week. I just think he's a locker room guy. So I would definitely take him above Will or Kyle in the sense that he's a leader and he's a locker room guy more so than Kyle. Doesn't mean Kyle's hated. It just means that he's more vocal and he's just more outgoing. But I think Buckeye Nation rained down hate on him, and I just like we just like to read into everything he says now as something negative. And I looked at the Gruden thing, and I talked about it up the front of the program. I looked into the Gruden thing, and when he talked about Marvin not crossing face, and Gruden totally pinned it on Marvin not crossing face with the corner. Kyle was saying, "Well, I think he thought I was going to throw a back shoulder. A little bit of miscommunication." He didn't really blame Marvin to me. He was trying to protect him, if anything. And Marvin did the same thing to his credit. And the Giant, we saw the video of him with the Giants staff who tried to go after Kyle and say, that was a horrible pass, wasn't it?" And Marvin just simply said, I got my hands on it. I should have caught it. So kudos to both of them for trying to kind of protect each other. Kyle didn't come out and, yeah, Marvin sucks. He screwed up and it just made me look bad. So, I mean, it's just like, I think people like misread the things he says all the time, and I get it, but I think that's all because we have a predisposed dislike of the guy, so therefore we look at everything he says in a negative light. Again, I think he was a mid quarterback compared to what we usually have. Um, I don't. I would say I don't believe he would have taken us to the promised land. I'm not saying he was the right quarterback for 2024, so don't misconstrue me. I just think that we don't look at the whole picture when we're blaming him or scapegoating him or saying he sucked. I just don't believe that in the slightest. Or if he did suck, which I don't believe, there's quite a few, as I just pointed out, extenuating circumstances that, you know, do not favor him versus a guy like Will Howard. It felt like, we, it felt like Kyle had to drive, a Maserati, but kind of a Maserati with some issues. Whereas then Ryan Day in the offseason says we want a different driver, and we're going to take the Maserati in and get it fixed, and then we're going to put the other driver in the brand new remodeled fixed Maserati, and all of a sudden it runs better, it's faster, it's cleaner, it's it's got it has some life to it now that it didn't have before. And then obviously you say, well, that's a better driver. Well, is it a better is I mean he might be a better driver, but is it necessarily better because he's just better, or is it better because he got a better version of the car? So anyway, guys, I appreciate you listening. Comment below, tell me I'm an idiot, I don't care. Disagree with me or agree with me or whatever. I want to hear your thoughts on this. We always want to read your comments and see what you have to say about this. We appreciate you for listening. Appreciate you as always for tuning into the OHIO podcast. Um, Eric has a really clever tagline here that I can never remember because he says it so fast. But anyway, guys, I like to say goodbye, God bless, and of course, go Bucks.